What's up, guys? Welcome to Why Girlfriends English, and today we have another phrasal verb video for you. So this is going to be the first of a two-part series on phrasal verbs of eating. Today we're going to talk about preparing food and cooking the food, and next week we're going to talk about serving the food and actually eating the food. So there's a whole lot of phrasal verbs that we're going to work on. That's why we had to split it into 2 weeks. Both of these are going to be accompanied by a listening practice video. So you guys are going to get a listening practice video this week and next week. Okay.
So just as a brief introduction, for those who haven't watched our previous videos, a phrasal verb is a verb combined with a preposition that when put together combines to make a new meaning.
And sometimes this is an entirely different meaning than the original verb, or it could be a more specific meaning of that verb. Either way, these verbs are highly contextualized, so they are very difficult to learn as English language learners. We know in the languages we've studied, phrasal verbs are one of the most difficult things alongside prepositions, actually.
Right, and they get more and more plentiful when there's a lot of movement happening. And when you're cooking or eating, that's definitely a lot of movement.
So we typically divide these videos into chapters or major sections, and then within those sections we have the related phrasal verbs. That way you're not learning all of the get phrasal verbs or all of the take out phrasal verbs, because that's really difficult to remember all at once because they all look and sound the same.
Yeah.
So we have found personally in our study that learning all the different things I can do within a context is more easy because I can practice them by physically practice them as I go. So when you are preparing food, we want you to think of these.
So the first one is whip up or throw together. And this is kind of a way that you would describe making a dinner or making a meal. So if kids are angry and they're cranky because they haven't eaten in a little bit and you're angry and cranky, you want to throw together dinner, which means that maybe you do a dinner that's a little easy.
Yeah, but it can also mean that you're just so good at cooking, it seems like it's effortless to you.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that will say, you know, my grandma could whip up anything from whatever she had in the fridge. And that's meant to be a compliment, meaning she was very creative with whatever leftovers or little bits of little this and a little bit of that put together. She could take all those odds and ends and whip something up that is delightful and super tasty.
Yeah.
So that is something that is also a compliment. So it can mean either throwing things together very fast in order to make a quick dinner, but it can also mean being able to really get around the kitchen and be able to make things creatively and as it comes.
The next one is whip up or whisk up.
Referring to a whisk.
Yes. So whip up means if you have heavy whipping cream or cream of some kind, you need to whip it up or whisk it up to make it like frothier. Whipped cream, for example.
It's going to have like a circle motion to it. So you're like whipping and fluffing at the same time. That's what whisking is. Yeah. Some people think it's just getting in there and just going side to side, like just a straight line. That's not whisking or whipping up, if you will. Whipping up means you're trying to get air in there while mixing something. Yeah. So you're fluffing it up or you're whisking it up. And so that's what a whisk is built for, really.
Yeah. And we use up because we're actually using the bowl, tilt the bowl a little sideways, and you whisk it up into the air.
Yes.
And so you're letting it fall back down. And so you whisk it up or whip it up. Next one is mix it up.
So what's the difference between mix up and whip up?
So it's that same motion that we were talking about before. With a bowl, if you're going to whisk it up or whip it up, it's going to be tilted slightly. So when you whip up, you're creating air, like Amber was just saying.
But mixing is like the focus is on the actual ingredients coming together. Yeah. So I can mix like this, I can mix with a spoon, I can mix with a mixer. Or I could whip it up and be mixing my batter that way.
Could refer to the dry ingredients or the wet ingredients. But generally speaking, we will say this in terms of like batter or dough or some kind of mixture of ingredients.
Right. So with mixing, it could be wet or dry. But with whip up and whisk up, it's probably going to be a wet ingredient that you're trying to fluff and add some air bubbles to. So we also use mix up when we make a mistake. Like maybe we confuse the facts or we get things mixed together that weren't supposed to be mixed together on accident, like switching names for people or mistaking like the plans, thinking I was going to do tomorrow's plans today and today's plans tomorrow. We would call that a mix-up because you've mixed the details of different things together and come up with an entirely different thing.
Yeah, a mix-up. The next one is chop up, like chop up the vegetables.
So whether this is going to be that classic movie or video game thing where somebody's going to or it's just like chop up the vegetables. So this could be fast and very fine. It could be very strict. There's a whole lot of vocabulary just for chopping vegetables. It could be a lot of things. Today we're going to stick with to chop up.
Yes.
Is because that's the one that we'll use for anything. Hey, can you chop up some fruit? Can you chop up some vegetables? It means there's going to be a lot of little cuts. Definitely not for a whole animal that you're cutting up, but it's definitely vegetables, whole or pieces, doesn't matter. But the fact is you're chopping it up.
Next one's really easy. It's to break off something. So like if you have a bar of chocolate, but you only need to break off one square, you would say, I need to break off one square of chocolate or one piece of chocolate.
Yeah. A lot of these will have like dividers like pressed into them, or they're going to be poured into a mold that has dividers, so it's easier to break in those sections.
Yeah.
So those specifically, every time you see those, you're going to use break off with your hands or chop up with a knife. The next one is a little bit difficult if you don't use shortening in your cooking, but we cut in shortening. So cut in actually has nothing to do with cutting, but it means that you've got, it's a U-shaped tool with lots of usually 5 dividers in it, and you use it to cut in. It puts the lard or the shortening or whatever you're using. In America, we often use shortening. So you could do shortening, margarine, butter, cold butter. The idea is it's in a somewhat solid state or gelatinous state, and what you're doing is you're cutting it into your flour. We do this to make biscuits. So you have your flour and your salt, and then you cut in the shortening. So shortening, when you scoop it out, it is this big blob. And you put it in there, and if you can mix and mix and mix with a spoon, but nothing's going to happen. So you need to cut it up. But if you use a knife or scissors, it's just going to take absolutely forever. It's going to be frustrating and gum up your blade. So it's better to use a pastry cutter, which is meant to break up those little pieces. And you put it in, and you rock it, and you turn it in the flour. And as it breaks up, the flour coats it so that you have tiny little pebbles of shortening or butter or whatever it is. So we use this often in baking, and specifically in biscuits and scones and things of that nature, but it's a very useful tool. But if you don't use shortening or cold butter in your cooking, then you might not have any idea what it is.
So the next one also uses cut, is to cut out an ingredient or cut out a biscuit or a shape out of a dough.
So it's either physical or it means something like leave out. If you're going to cut out something from the recipe, that means you're just not going to add it. I'm just going to cut it out because I don't need it.
Yeah, like if you don't want the salt, you cut out the salt.
You might have heard us say, hey, cut it out. Like means stop saying that. Stop talking like that. Stop doing that. Well, that's an older term now. We don't really say it anymore. We say other things now. But that's the same idea. As you're cutting something out, you don't want to use it. Now, to cut out biscuits or cookies or something, we actually have biscuit cutters and cookie cutters in little fun shapes.
Yeah.
But that's the idea, is you roll out, well, hey, here you go. There's your next phrasal verb, is roll out dough. You roll it out into a flat sheet that's only about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch thick, and then you use a biscuit cutter to cut the even pieces out.
Next one is grind up, like grind up the coffee. So these are things that are hard that you have to grind up into a powder.
Yes.
So grind up coffee is a really good example. You have to grind the coffee so that the water can actually make it into coffee. If you just put the beans in the coffee machine, there's no way it's going to turn it into coffee.
Yes.
So you grind it up, and then the water goes through, and then you get coffee.
And of course, this applies to spices as well. So peppercorns of any kind. You've got all kinds of spices that we grind up into the spice powders that we like to use in our cooking. So the next one is to measure out or weigh out. So recipes will specifically lay out the amounts that you're supposed to use. Now, if you're really familiar with something that you're cooking, you're just going to throw things together because we say eyeball it, which means you just kind of see it and you kind of guess based off of what you see. But if you're going to teach someone else how to do it, they're going to say, well, how much? You can use something like a measuring cup. In America, we use 1 cup system. We don't use the metric system very often.
Yeah.
We know how, we're all taught how, but we still stubbornly stick to cup measurements for some reason.
We like dry volumes more than weight, because it makes it really easy. I don't have to have a scale around. I don't have to have anything else around me. All I have to have is my cup and my flour, or my cup and something else. I don't have to have anything but that. I just...
Right. So if I'm doing a very delicate recipe for a very specific cake or frosting or something, I will use weights because that's going to be far more accurate than this is.
Yeah.
This, I could just not pack down the sugar or the flour that's in it, or it could be really fluffy that day. If it's humid, there's going to be even more in this than there would normally. So this is actually rather approximate, but it's far more accurate still than just scooping it out with my hands until it looks right.
And we would use measure out with a measuring cup, but weigh out things that we use for mass or weight, like 200 grams of flour.
So another thing that you'll do when you're cooking a recipe is that you might replace something. If you don't have shortening, maybe you'll use cold butter. Or if you don't have butter, maybe you'll use bacon grease or lard. So these are one of the things that you can replace with or swap out ingredients in a recipe based off of what you have.
Yeah, like maybe you swap out almond milk for regular whole milk, for example.
Right, or lemon juice for lime juice in guacamole or something like that.
Anything that you replace or swap out, you can use that. So the next section is a little bit shorter. It's about cooking the food. So we prepared the food, we rolled out the dough, we chopped up the vegetables, and now we're going to actually cook the food.
It's exciting now.
Yeah.
So the next one has two forms. So you have to cook out, which to cook out means that you're going to go cook outside, perhaps grill out, for example. But if you grill out, it mainly means meat on a specific grill. But if you cook out, it means you could be cooking hot dogs on a fire. You could be doing stuff on a little like propane burner. You could be grilling. It doesn't matter. Cook out is the idea of you're cooking outside and you're eating outside. It's a whole event, which is why we also call it a cookout. We have a noun form for it.
So the next one is heat up, as in heat up the pan or even heat up the food.
Or heat up the grill. Can you please heat up the pan? Meaning that it's not hot enough yet. But if I say heat up, I'm putting a little bit more emphasis, which means it's cold. Like, do you mind heating up the pan? Means it's starting completely from scratch. Heat and heat up, we have different contexts that we use it in. Most of them are pretty interchangeable. So for your purposes at this level, I would stick with saying heat the pan or heat up the pan, heat the oven, heat up the oven. Both are okay at this point.
And the next one that's kind of like heat up is to fry up. So this comes, you might know this if you know the word French fries or just frying in general. We like to do this. It's also called sauté.
So if you say I'm going to fry up some wings or you're going to fry up something, the idea is you're submerging the food in the oil. The oil is hot already. You're submerging the food in the oil. So think KFC, or think fried chicken or fried okra. It's just something fried.
Yeah, that would be deep fried.
That would be deep fried, exactly. So if I'm going to say I'm going to fry up, I'm going to have at least this much oil on it.
Yeah.
So, and I'm probably going to bread whatever it is I'm putting in there, or it's going to be completely submerged in that oil. But if I say I'm going to saute something, there's just a little bit of oil, like a tablespoon, just a little bit of oil in the bottom, and I'm cooking the vegetables in that.
So sometimes when you heat up a pot of water too long, especially if you're trying to boil something, then the water will boil over the pot.
This happens with pastas, with potato, with rice. All those things, like if you have water and the point is to boil it off or to cook for just a few minutes, whatever's in it, it often bubbles up with the starch on top and it bubbles out and over. So to boil over. Yeah,
which is not a good thing.
If you have a mistake and things just boil over or you had a frying accident or something, things might burst into flames.
Yes, burst into is the phrasal verb there. And it's not very common, but just be aware that if you're cooking with oil, that may happen.
Yeah. So to burst into flames is specifically describing the point when it burst. So with the point that it caught on fire. But if you're talking about something that blew up into flames, like it blew up, that's more of an explosion thing. That means like there's nothing going to be left. But when something bursts into flames, it's not that goes away. It's not bursting like a balloon, but it's just like fire started all of a sudden. And you can put out that fire and still have something somewhat edible. It's just going to be black on the outside. Or you can have something that's just a complete black rock left over.
The last one for cooking the food is kind of a little different, but it's to warm up the food. So this is if your food's already cooked or if you already have it prepared. Or leftovers, for example. But either way, if you have older food, you may warm it up.
Whenever you have food that is not done, you're going to save it for the next meal. We call them leftovers, which is the noun form, but it comes from a phrasal verb, left over. So some things that we will leave over for the next meal.
All right, guys, so that's our phrasal verbs of food. It was a lot. All of these, what are great about these phrasal verbs in particular is that you can go immediately to your kitchen, to that context, and you can look around and you can use these phrasal verbs right now in your daily life.
Yeah, so your next meal, I want you to go ahead and describe what you're doing and what you're doing as you cook, what you're doing as you eat in phrasal verbs. And then when you clean up, make sure you use phrasal verbs of house chores in order to describe cleaning up.
Like we said, guys, keep practicing these and be on the lookout later this week. We're going to put out part 2 of our phrasal verbs of food, so keep an eye out for that, and it's coming soon.
All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye. Or with a bowl, if you're going to whisk it up or whip it up, it's going to be tilted wow, that was a weird. It's going to be tilted slightly, sideways, slightly.
Wow.
Weigh out 200 grams of flour.
Did it die?
Nice.